Why do you want them to listen to your podcast?
So that when they think about starting a business, they've got the content that is pointing them in the right direction.
That is such a valuable piece of advice there.
The change in mindset makes a massive difference.
Welcome to Aussie Lawn Stars.
So, Felix, welcome to the dungeon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
It's been a little bit of a mission to make this one happen, but it looks like we're going to work.
Yeah,
this
it
time.
looks like
Fingers crossed.
it should come up good this time after a few attempts.
Yeah. So we caught up last week in Melbourne, and I grabbed a few names from people that we met up with down there, and I was like, all right, I'm going to hit you up for a interview very shortly.
Very excited.
So, Felix, you're younger than me. You're probably you're younger than my son, actually.
Yeah, I am pretty young. I've literally just turned 20 a couple of days ago.
Yeah, cool. So happy birthday. Now, being that young, how long have you been in business?
So I have been in business just coming up now to about a year and a half. I started doing my own jobs just right about the time I finished high school. So obviously ended year 12 at about 18 years old and have just started doing a bit of work from there, going from starting with, just filling my car boot with some really basic and primitive equipment up to the setup and sort of business that I've built up now.
What car did you start in?
So I started working out of the back of my Subaru XV, which I just got secondhand off my grandparents. It's a bit of a struggle with boot space. I've still got it, but I'm looking to sell it sooner rather than later, just for the reason that it's not really a very good work car. Just not much equipment fits in the back of it. Green waste that doesn't fit in bins is a massive struggle. And I just think it's a lot easier to be working out of something like a ute or potentially going to something like a van.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's talk about that more when we get back to talking about equipment. But the Subaru XV is not a bad first
It is. It's a pretty good car. Not great for work purposes, but other than that, obviously, it's a very nice, comfortable, reliable vehicle. So if you're not thinking of starting a gardening business, I can highly recommend it.
Fair enough. So you alluded to some of the things you did when you started. So buying tools on the cheap, buying secondhand tools. Did you buy everything secondhand?
Yeah. So initially what I started with was just a corded lawnmower that my mum had lying around to do our very small back lawn. Obviously that was, a massive struggle to use that commercially, trying to find a power outlet at every house that I'd show up at. And obviously it struggled a lot on any grass that was, longer than this thick. A couple of just, hand shears, secateurs, shovels, rakes, that sort of thing. I made the very foolish decision of buying a couple of cheap Bunnings tools, like a little Ryobi whippersnipper, just because we had at home a blower vac off the same battery. But I learned my lesson really quick that stuff is just nothing more than, a glorified toy, and it just doesn't cut it. So from there, I started buying some cheaper secondhand petrol stuff. So the first pieces of petrol equipment I got would have been a $60 Victor mower and another $60 Home Light whippersnipper and chainsaw. So those didn't last very long, but it was a massive eye-opener onto what you can do with a little bit more power. And from there, I just went straight into buying exclusively pretty much Stihl tools. And I've been through a couple of mowers, but I've got a decent Honda engine Victor Mustang one now, which is what I'm going to be using as my primary mower.
Yeah, you'll get a kick out of this. My oldest son, he bought a house just down the road from me. He's 500 metres down the road. And once he realised that he needed to cut his own grass, he borrowed a 240-volt plug-in mower from his from his
Yep.
wife's parents. And he was mowing with that, and I saw him mowing with it. And I was like, "Here, try the
Yeah,
Ego Select cut." And he's like, "Wow, that is
It's
so much
insane.
better." And then after he borrowed the Ego Select cut off me a couple of times, he said, "Oh, I need to get my own mower. What do you recommend?" And I was like, "Well, battery's great, but what's your budget?" So he ended up going and getting a secondhand Honda
Yeah.
off Marketplace, and yeah, he was blown away with how good the power and the cut quality is with that. It's particularly when he's cutting cooch and he waits until it's long before he
Yeah,
cuts
absolutely.
it.
That's one of the times that the battery ones are going to struggle a little bit. Maybe not the best
Yeah.
ones, but definitely the entry stuff is not going to do well on long grass.
Well, the Ego will cut the grass quite comfortably, but because of the way the deck works with the Ego, it's much better when you're keeping it short and cutting it routinely rather than waiting until it's a bit thick and
Yeah,
long.
absolutely. Yeah, that's pretty much always the case. But, not everyone is going to be mowing their lawn every week or 2 weeks.
Yes, unlike me.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. Like, I think when you're starting out a business, you're looking to just take on what you can get, and a lot of the time that is those kind of unkept lawns and that sort of thing. And having that sort of
Yeah.
powerful petrol mower is definitely just a useful and versatile tool, in my opinion, to be able to get through those sorts of jobs.
Yeah, and the Honda powered. You said the Honda powered
Yeah,
Mustang.
it's
is
a
it?
Victor Mustang deck with a Honda engine on it, and it's been really good.
Yeah, I think that deck
Yeah,
works
it's
really well.
nice
It's
and
good at
light
clearing
too.
grass.
I bought it off a guy that did a
Yep.
few mowers up, and he had another Honda one which was just a lot heavier, and I just
Yeah.
went with the lighter one just for that reason.
Yeah, if you're going to do a lot of lawns, probably start looking at self-propelled. But
Yeah.
your focus isn't
Yeah,
really
that's
lawns, is
it.
it?
So yeah, I'm definitely not focused on just doing lawns. It's definitely, something that comes up as part of a lot of jobs, and it's definitely something that I, do offer
Yeah.
to anyone that asks. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not looking to have an exclusive, lawn mowing business like a lot of people have, where it's kind of the main focus of their
Yeah.
business. I'm looking to have
Yep.
more of a, holistic gardening maintenance business where I can offer a lot of different services like hedge trimming, pruning, weeding if necessary, planting things, soft landscaping. So, like putting down turf, mulching
Yep.
garden beds, all that sort of stuff. And then, offering lawn mowing as part of that, not just as the sole purpose of the business.
Yeah. So when you started your business a year and a half ago, did you find that you were picking up only lawn mowing jobs to start with, or were you getting everything
No, I
thrown
was
at you?
getting everything thrown at me. So I would often, go to a client's house to mow the lawn, and then they'd say something like, "Oh, can you cut this branch? Oh, can you trim this?" And I remember there were a couple of instances where I just grabbed a little rubbish handsaw from the shed and was sawing off a branch with my hand, and it was taking, 10 minutes to get the thing off. And I just
Yep.
concluded from there that, like, I need to have that equipment, like something like a chainsaw, something like a hedge trimmer, just because I know people are going to ask.
Yeah.
And if I'm there to, look after their garden, I want to be able to offer all of those services instead of just saying, "Oh, you've got to find someone else if you want to have one branch cut off."
For sure. That's if you've got the right tool and you're in the right spot when they want it done, then you're
That's
making
it.
the money. So you what's the transition from when you first started to now? Has it been a case of starting with lawns and then getting mostly jobs that don't have lawns, or is it still 50-50 in terms of customers you pick up that want both done?
I don't think I could give you an exact number. I think I just, get a bit of everything. It's a bit different sort of every week. I've got quite a
Yeah.
few just regular lawn mowing or regular hedge trimming or regular both type of clients. And then at the same time, I'm also
Yeah.
taking on a lot of, one-offs, like things like cleanups,
Yep.
big hedges, real
Yeah, okay.
estate jobs for like if a tenant's vacated a property or something like that. And yeah, a lot
Yep.
of those do end up, turning into regular or semi-regular jobs. And from those, the word of
Yeah,
mouth is
of course.
really powerful too.
Yeah. So is your main way of marketing word of mouth then?
It's definitely one of the key ones that's been pretty successful for me. I do also run a lot of just Facebook ads, like not paid ones, usually just through like local community groups. So like I just go
Yep.
into all of the local suburbs around my area and pop a few posts up, and
Yep.
I've had like a lot of success in generating leads through that. I've also tried things like making flyers and putting them in mailboxes and things like that, but I just haven't had the same success with that as I have online.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So I think looking at what other people do, a lot of people in our industry mostly do the word of mouth only. And that might be like you, where they do a little bit on Facebook local groups or something like that, but they're relying on other people in their community already giving their business the reputation that it is. So they then gain customers through neighbours, real estates, and people going, yep, we recommend you when they see you on the Facebook
Yeah,
group.
absolutely. Like a lot of gardeners around here don't have any online presence, any sort of website or anything, maybe like a Facebook page at most. And they just, find that they're busy enough through word of mouth itself. If they're, especially operating as like a solo operator or something, once you start doing a good job and getting referred, it's quite easy to get swamped, especially in the springtime.
Yeah, that's it. So, when you've done this, have you said you have tried some leaflet drops and
Yeah, I've
other
tried it, but I just haven't had the same success as I have had through online or just word
Yeah.
of mouth marketing.
Yeah, and I think the difference there is a little bit of confirmation bias. So when you do a letterbox drop or a flyer drop, you probably get around 0.3% take up on that. Whereas when you have a neighbor of a customer or a real estate make a referral, you're probably getting 90 to 95% take up on those. So it might seem hugely different, but what you don't see in the background is the amount of people that see your vehicle or your trailer, or they have heard about you through the real estate agent, and the amount of times that those referrals don't actually get to you is huge. So what I've noticed other people saying is if you do letterbox drops, do it to the neighbours either side of your existing customers, and that's great for a very targeted one. Or the alternative is to go, okay, let's pay somebody, $500 to $1,000 to do a letterbox drop for a suburb or several streets in an area where you want to gain more customers. And it's an upfront cost that's quite significant. So say if you spend $700 or $800 doing it, that's comparable to a franchise fee for a whole month.
Yeah, it could be.
But the return over time on doing something like that will be as good or better than your word of mouth referrals.
Yeah, potentially it could be, but I guess you've got to weigh up whether those upfront costs are worth it. And I guess in a lot of cases they are. Like, franchises themselves also would attract their own fees, but wouldn't really gain the success they have if there wasn't something to offer.
Yeah, well, I highly recommend people join up with a franchise because it is a certain thing. You know that you're paying fees, but you also know that they're giving you leads.
Yeah.
So most of the franchises will pump the leads to a new person that signs up as a franchisee, get their schedule full, but then you keep on paying that $800 a month, even if you're not getting any of the new leads.
And then if you want to go independent, I guess there are various costs associated with that too, depending on what franchise it is.
There's a lot of resistance to franchisees moving to independence.
Exactly.
And most franchise models make it difficult, or they will actually take you to court to prevent you from doing it. Jim's Mowing is the only one I know of that has a clear path. This is how you do it. And I think Fox allows it as well, but don't quote me on that. I know Jim's
I've heard that. I think there was an upfront cost. I think it was $5,000, but that just removes any restraint on trade.
Yeah, there's a couple of little things that you need to understand if you go down that path. But that's not what this interview is about.
Yeah, exactly.
I think more the point I was trying to make is that comparison between a franchise and doing your own form of paid marketing, and the reward that you can get from doing that can well be worthwhile for people in your situation where you want to grow and gain more customers in a very targeted area. Then it's an upfront cost, but it's comparable to a franchise.
Exactly. And if you're getting them in the one area, then that's a massive benefit, because it's one thing to fill your books up and be, driving all over town. But if you can really concentrate that work into particular areas and be able to, service one area over a few days, or service just, exclusively a really small area with no travel time, you're going to save a lot of time and a lot of money, especially if you've got staff.
Yeah. Now, I'm just bringing up maps, and I've got a map of Melbourne in front of me. Now, even though I was down there last week and met up with you, I have no clue when it comes to the geography of Melbourne, which is why I've brought this up in maps. So your area that you're working in, is it around St Kilda? Do you go into St Kilda that far?
So I work a lot around, if you look on the map, the sort of St Kilda, Albert Park and Caulfield areas are like probably my sort of closest and best areas that I like to service as much as I can. I do go out a bit further, so I'll, sometimes find myself on the other side as far as Port Melbourne, or up in Camberwell, Glen Iris, past Carnegie, going into the Chadstone sort of area, and down to Brighton and Sandringham sometimes.
Oh, wow. Okay. So if you go down Brighton, how far down is Brighton?
It's not very far. It's probably only maybe 15, 20-minute drive from where I am max. But at the end of the day, like if you've got a few clients in those particular areas, it's not a problem. But if you're going back and forth, say, like I remember I used to do days where I'd go and have to do a job in Camberwell, and then I'd have to go and do a job in Brighton, and it would be like 20 to 30 minutes of travel between two jobs, and it just would add up, and it's just such a killer.
And I guess those areas we're talking about, for people who are not in Melbourne, they're not far from the CBD. It still really is the central part of Melbourne. So you're talking more the suburbs where the houses are, as opposed to in the CBD where it's all business focus. So you're going to get a lot of traffic at peak hour times.
Absolutely.
And I guess you'd know your way around. You can avoid some of the high traffic areas, but you still got to deal with that at sort of like 8 till 9 a.m. in the morning, and 3 till 5 in the afternoon. It's going to be crazy.
For sure. And another thing I'm looking at is maybe doing something like having shorter days. So potentially, starting a little bit later or finishing a little bit earlier, and just trying to, pump those days full of a few clients, but, take my time and, not try and be as greedy as I can and squeeze as much in as I can, because, sometimes having a sleep in isn't the worst thing in the world. And if you can dodge the traffic, then that's a bit of a bonus. Or if you can start a bigger job early in the morning, that's also, something that can avoid the rush.
Yeah, so if you could condense your areas down to make sure that you're not traveling as far, or you can spend a whole day in a fairly condensed area, then that also benefits you when you're talking about doing shorter days, because you don't have as much travel time in between jobs, and it's easier for you to get through them quickly.
Absolutely.
So that's it's still a fairly condensed area when you look at it. Then I know there's people that travel a lot further around Melbourne when they're working. Sure. It is a pretty good route density.
Yeah. Look, it's definitely something that I want to work on and concentrate further. At the end of the day, like I'm, choosing not to service a lot of further out areas for a few reasons. One, it's just too far, and two, also, as you get further out, a lot of the blocks are not really the type of job that I want to be doing. Something like, just a lot of larger lawns without much else to be doing, are not really the type of job that I want to be taking on.
Now that you mentioned that, it makes me think of a point that I keep on bringing up all the time. In places like where you are, What do you consider a larger lawn?
What do I consider a larger lawn? Oh, it's a good question. I couldn't give you an exact size, but I reckon any sort of job where I'm spending, over 2 to 3 hours just mowing is not really the type of job that I want to be servicing. For a number
Yep,
of
fair
reasons.
enough.
One, I think it gets boring if you're just stuck in the one place for a really long time doing just one thing. Um, and
Yep.
two, a lot of the time, I think I hear this a lot that people have trouble being able to charge correctly for those sort of jobs because a lot of people see lawn mowing as something that they can do themselves and therefore something that's not really worth what it has to be worth for it to be, a worthwhile job for a
Yeah.
contractor to do, as opposed to something like hedge trimming, where often people have no trouble at all, charging exactly what it's worth or more because it's something that people not only don't want to do themselves, but they can't because they don't have, the right
Yeah.
equipment, ladders, and, they just don't have the knowledge and skill to get it right.
I think that can go both ways because often when people look at the work you're doing, if you're not using a mower, they think your equipment is cheap and affordable, and they should just be paying for $25 an hour for the manual labor you're doing, right?
Yeah, that's it for sure. Definitely things like hand weeding. A lot of people don't see much value in that, or soft landscaping with a
Yeah.
wheelbarrow and a shovel. At the same time, they're gonna
So
bring up that. But
my
at the end of
thought
the day, if they could get the same result that you can get as a professional, they probably wouldn't be calling you.
exactly. Now, my thought there is that a lot of the question marks around pricing are questions we put in our own head. It's not the customer most of the time. So if you provide a quality service and your reputation precedes you because of your quality service, you can kind of charge whatever you want. Now, we've got to put a caveat there because I've heard people call me up and say, you can't say you can charge whatever you want. You'll have people charging $200 an hour and wondering why they're not getting any work. But you can charge $200 an hour. Some people won't get any work. Other people will be absolutely full schedule on $200 an hour. The point that I am making is that you become sought after because of your reputation, and your price can increase on the basis of your reputation.
Absolutely.
So if you're talking about hand weeding, I know a guy that charges $175 an hour for hand weeding, and that's what he tells a new customer when he does a quote. It's going to be an hourly rate, $175 an hour.
Yep.
You don't like it, go away. Now, his main demographic of customers is doctors and lawyers, so they charge $600 an hour or more, and they're like, $175 an hour, but I'm getting a good quality person doing that.
And if he's got the reputation and, they want their garden looking, absolutely immaculate, he'd obviously find people that are more than happy to pay for it.
So the same is true with lawn mowing, right? Now, if you're, and I'm going to make a guess here, tell me what you actually end up doing most of the time, but most of your lawns, I'm going to guess, are 200 or 300 square meters or less.
Roughly about that, depending on, whether it's doing the front, back, and the nature strip, or a lot of blocks around here have front and a nature strip and no lawn in the backyard. Like they might have something like a deck or a pool. But they're obviously not often huge. Sometimes the bigger ones do come up, and, if it's the right price, I'm more than happy to do it, but it's not something that I seek out.
So having the right tool for the job makes sure that you're making the right money for the job too. And I would say with you, what you're doing with a push mower, not self-propelled, you're still making good money when you mow lawns at those sort of sizes. If you want to make it more efficient, if you have a look at a Toro Time Master 30-inch machine, walk behind, self-propelled, they are really efficient, and they're still quite good for getting in and out of those tight spaces on those sort of lawns you do. A lot of people will prefer to have a lightweight mower like you've got because you've got to get it in and out of tight spaces, up and down some stairs occasionally, and that makes it a lot easier. It's a lot lighter than a Toro Time Master. But a lot of people will look at jobs like you're doing and they'll go, oh, maybe I can get a 32-inch stand-on machine because I can get a 30-inch Time Master on those jobs. And then once they try doing that, they find the stand-on machine is costing them time compared to the walk-behind 30-inch self-propelled. So the stand-on 32-inch machine is actually better suited to the properties that are sort of between 200 and 600 square metres, or even up to a quarter acre. I know people do acreage mowing with 32-inch stand-on machines, but their ideal location is those suburbs that are a little bit further out, those jobs that you don't like doing that take you 45 minutes to mow through to 2 or 3 hours to mow. If they've got a tight access gate, then a 32-inch stand-on machine is going to still get through there, and they're going to be a really good machine. And then you go to what I do, where you're talking acreage mowing and wide area mowing, and you go for your 42-inch and your 60-inch machines and even bigger. And if you are confident that you're providing a good quality service, you charge the right rate and you make good money on any of those.
Absolutely. And also, obviously, as you go bigger, you're able to get through those lawns a bit quicker. But the issue where I am is some of those, massive ride-ons that you're talking about not only are massively expensive, but are going to struggle to get through some of the gates, particularly closer into bigger CBDs. So exactly what you're saying about, having that sort of 32-inch self-propelled mower is, probably the right sort of balance for if you're going for those bigger lawn jobs a little bit further out than the target demographic that I'm trying to service. I have looked into stuff like Honda self-propelled also, which obviously have a pretty good reputation. But at the moment, like with me just trying not to target those massive lawns, I just don't feel I can justify putting that kind of money into a mower rather than putting it into something like a hedge trimmer, because I find like I'm taking on a lot of hedges and I've got staff with me. If I'm the only one, with a hedge trimmer and they're just kind of standing around until it's time to rake up, then it just costs me a lot of time. But if I've got, 2 or 3 really good hedge trimmers, not only am I always going to have the right tool for the job, but I'm going to be able to, do the top of a hedge while I've got a worker doing the side. And then by the time it's all done, we can just rake up together and save massive amounts of time.
Yeah. So, the main point I was making there is you get the right tool for the right job and it makes it worthwhile. So you've got the right mower for what you need to do. A 30-inch Time Master might help you be a little bit more efficient, but it's going to be a lot heavier if you've got to lift it up and down stairs. Definitely. So you've got to pick the right tool for what you do. And because what you were saying earlier is that your predominant market is customers where you provide a complete service for their yard, their gardens, then the lawnmower is not your main tool.
Yeah, it's the way I view it is it's part of a fleet of various tools that I'm going to use to be able to get a good quality result doing a variety of things, rather than my clients having to find a lawnmower man that has a mower and a whippersnipper and maybe a blower and not much else, and then find a tree or hedge person to do all of the pruning. I want to be that sort of person that can offer all of those services in one, so they can just call me to, maintain their entire garden. And I think not only is that going to give me more work, but it's going to mean I can offer my clients a better deal in that it's more convenient to only have to be, dealing with my business rather than multiple businesses. And also when I'm doing multiple things at once, I can, save time doing things like trimming hedges and then mulching up the clippings with a mower. While I've got the mower out, I can mow the lawn, and it's not going to, take a massive amount more time too.
That's it. Yes, I have a couple of decent hedge trimmers, and I spent a fair time this morning stripping one down, cleaning the blades, re-greasing the gearbox, and sharpening the blades, putting it all back together, and making sure it's ready to keep on going for another 12 months. But I think that's where you stand to benefit a lot, is making sure you've got those hedge trimmers, like you say, 2 or 3 decent hedge trimmers. And if you got 2 people working on the tools, you might even want more than 3 hedge trimmers, just so you've got some choices there between a pole trimmer and a short trimmer. And opportunity for doing some topiary, some balls and boxes and bits and pieces, and you've got good choices of tools. It's
exactly like
going to make you a lot more efficient.
Sometimes I'll be up a ladder and it's just a really awkward cut to make with a pole trimmer. But if I've got that hand one, I can just go up and do the cut with the hand trimmer and then take the pole back instead of having to move the ladder. And it just, makes
Yep.
it easier to get that really good quality result.
That's it. Yeah. So your customers are ideally customers that have got small lawns and lots
Yep.
of gardens. Yeah.
Lots
Awesome.
of, hedges, trees to prune, that sort of thing. Even larger trees aren't something that I shy away from. So I've done quite a bit
Yeah.
of like just casual work with arborists to try and learn how to, correctly prune trees and do all that sort of work. And, sometimes I'll take on larger trees under my own business and enlist the help of someone like a contract climber to go up and make sure that everything gets cut up safely. And then me and or my workers will be able to clean it up. And yeah, it's just a service that I feel I'm able to offer my customers and deliver if I've got the right people to help out and make sure it runs smoothly.
Efficiency is the thing that rules a business and the decisions you make as a small business owner. Right Mowers give you the options in their product lineup to match efficiency with size, fuel usage, and the type of jobs you want to target, from catching to mulching or side discharge, from roadside verges to acreages, and manicured lawns to 6 feet tall and super long. I've been using the Right Stander I 42-inch with a Catch Pro for manicured areas and the Stander ZK61 to maximise productivity for large open acreage mowing. If you need to replace your push mower, try the 32-inch Stander B. If you have more open access to residential properties, there's a 42 through 48-inch option that suits you. And if you want to enter the acreage market, the 52, 61 and 72-inch machines have choices in engine size and model type to suit the work you want it to do. Right Standards go the distance, saving you time and money season after season.
A lot of the tools, you've already selected the right tools for the job. And one of the ones that we touched on is the idea of moving from your car to a ute or a van.
Yeah, so I've got a
so that's
single
going to help.
cab ute at the moment, but I'm looking really at going to a van instead.
Yeah. And for a lot of the work you do, a van will make you a lot more efficient because you don't need to tow a trailer. You can put green waste in bags in the back of the van. Means you're in and out of tight parking spaces a lot easier and tight streets without worrying about a trailer. But the downside with a van is if you get fuel fumes all through the back of the van, they'll creep into the front.
Yeah. It's something I used to deal with a lot when I was working out of the back of my car and I, first started using petrol equipment. I wouldn't notice it so much, but whenever I'd have another passenger in my car, like my mom or a friend or someone, they'd, say, oh, it reeks of petrol. So, yeah, that's probably one of the downsides of having a van. But with it being a bit bigger, hopefully it won't be as noticeable as that.
There are some vans you can find that have a sealed back so that they don't have any fumes coming through. But you need to know what you're looking for to try and find a van like that. There's only a few around that are either used for cold storage in the back or something along those lines where it's actually fully sealed off.
Yeah.
And that will make a big difference with all aspects of green waste rotting in the back or fuel smell.
Absolutely, yeah. I reckon with a van, it'll probably be, maybe more frequent visits to the tip. But if it's all, bagged up and I can get a really good amount in the back of it, rather than having to worry about towing a trailer around every time I take on anything that, remotely resembles a big job, I think just the convenience aspect of not having to worry about finding 2 parking spots. If I want to have staff drive my car, I'm not going to be as worried about them, having an incident with a van as I am with a trailer. I think is a lot harder to maneuver. And I just think it's going to, just simplify things a lot.
Yep, definitely. So we've covered a fair bit about your equipment, and I want to ask you a little bit about some of the other things involved in business. So when you started up, did you have any idea of how to charge your pricing?
No, not at all. I was
That's
just
normal.
pretty fresh out of high school. me and all my friends
Yep.
were, doing pretty entry level jobs, Coles, Macca's, waitering, that sort of
Yep.
thing, for, 18, 19, $20 an hour. And I just sort of started my business charging about $30 an hour to customers, which obviously, if anyone who's watching has any idea about the industry, they'd know is, way too cheap to be able to sustainably run a business and cover all the costs associated
Yes.
with that.
Yeah. So, did you once you started looking at that and going, "Oh, that's too cheap. I'm not making money." Did you just pick a number and go, "Oh, I think it should be double that," or "I think it should be an extra 50%"?
No, so I sort of steadily worked my way up. I mean, it's going to sound a bit stupid, but um, I really put a lot of thought into going up to asking customers for $50 an hour. Just because I was
Yep.
concerned, as you were saying, that I would lose the work because I wasn't, going to be the cheapest person out there. And once you're in that mentality of racing to the bottom, it's really easy to just end up working your ass off for absolutely not much at all. And yeah, look,
Yeah,
I
that's
I
right.
got up to 50 pretty quickly, and I'm, now at a point where I'm looking at sort of $70, $80 an hour if I'm quoting a job as my minimum. So I'm usually
Yeah, okay.
quoting to try and, increase that. And I'm not often giving customers an hourly rate unless it's something where it's like a job where it's completely different things every time I'm going there and it's just impossible to quote.
Yeah, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer in terms of whether you give a customer an hourly rate or a fixed price. There's good arguments both ways, and it depends on the type of customers you chase and a whole bunch of different factors in there. But I think most people need to have an answer for a customer who asks about
Yeah.
the rate. And if you don't have an answer, then a lot of people just call that customer a red flag and say, if they're asking about my rate, then they're asking the wrong questions. I don't like them. See you later.
Yeah, I mean, look, I do find that sometimes that is the case. Like I've I once quoted a job, I think it was a $400 job. The
Yeah.
customer agreed to the job, probably had quotes for, possibly more, possibly less, but was happy to go with my quote for whatever reason. And on the
Yeah.
day that I was scheduled to do the job, I messaged him that I'd be coming at midday. And from there,
Yep.
he sort of, I think, connected the dots in his head that I was anticipating this to be something like a, 4 or 5 hour job rather than it being a, 6 or 7 or 8 hour job. And from there, that's when he started asking questions. And, you know, I did
Yep.
actually give him a rate. So he asked,
Yeah.
he said he'd prefer to pay per hour. So I told him no problem. He could pay me $90 an hour and I'd be, more than happy to do it. But if we're going hourly,
Yep.
then I'm not going to be able to give you a fixed price, which is what I usually prefer to do for
Yeah.
something like that. And after hearing that, he
Yep.
just, said, don't worry about it. So I think that's one of the
Yeah.
instances where someone like that can be a bit of a red flag to work with. But at the same time,
Yep.
I'm sure you'll find customers out there that if you do give them that answer and they're satisfied with the service, they won't have a problem with it. And, they're definitely someone that's still worth working with.
Yep. What I've found is a lot of people like that will say no, not interested once they find out what the rate is. But most of those people don't have a backup option or a
Yeah.
cheaper option to go to as well. So if you give them the right answer, you can often keep the work and a happy customer. And rather than it being a red flag, it becomes a point of an advantage for you because the customer has transparency and they love the work that you do.
Absolutely, yeah. And like I think when working with those sorts of customers, like often they're not necessarily looking for just the cheapest person. Like they may have received a cheaper quote, but there may be various issues with that person. They, might not have correct equipment. They may not be insured at all. They may not be experienced or not have any sort of a reputation. And if you can,
Yep.
be a trustworthy and transparent person to work with, then honestly, they're quite likely to go and work with you. And I think also like
Yeah.
if you can communicate with them why that's the rate, often they'll understand it more than if there's no communication on that part. So
Exactly. So, yeah, I guess there are areas where you go, okay, I know the suburb. So where you're working, you've got some fairly good suburbs. But if you head out to some of the rougher suburbs, and I'm guessing if you go out a little bit further west from where you are, you probably start finding some of those suburbs got higher crime rates, lower paying customers, and you're probably not going to be chasing a lot of quotes in
Yeah,
some of those
no.
suburbs because you know that they only want to pay
Yeah,
cheap.
so the way Melbourne is, if you're not familiar, that we've got the Westgate Bridge. So all my work is on the eastern side of the Westgate Bridge. I never, ever in my life have given a quote on the other side of the bridge. But
No,
going
okay.
further south and further east, we do find a lot of those suburbs that, as you're saying, can be a little bit rougher, a little bit
Yep.
more crime, maybe, lower median income. I have gone out
Yep.
a bit into some of those suburbs, and honestly, it's not
Yeah.
always the case. Like, there are definitely people out there that are still happy to, pay the right rate for the service. And if they're happy to pay for
Yeah.
it, I'm happy to go there, as long as it's not too
Yep.
far geographically from where I am. And at the same time, also in some of the richer suburbs, I do even find some people that, obviously have a very high income, expensive property, and they just turn out to be stingy too. So it can work both ways.
Yes. Yeah, I find usually the people who are rich, who are stingy, will pick a suburb where they're living around people that are lower income than
Yeah.
them. Whereas if they're all on the best street, they know that comes with a higher
Yeah.
price tag. But yeah, if you've got a suburb which has got a mixture, you'll find usually the lower income players are happy to pay the rates you ask, whereas the higher income earners are more likely to squabble
Yeah,
over it.
yeah, and I think like sometimes people compare the rates that you charge to what they sort of might make in their job. Like, I had someone
Yeah.
that I quoted say something like, "Oh, my son did a 4-year university degree and he can't earn $50 an hour. Why can you?" And I sort of had to say something like, well, we've got to cover the cost of a lot of really expensive equipment. So it's not, really what we walk away with at the end of the day after we build you, because you've got to take into account those expenses.
So have you assessed your expense ratio so that you know with your hourly rate that you're chasing at the moment, whether it's break even, bringing in a profit, or are you still working all those out as you go?
I'm still working them out a bit. I haven't really gone over them in huge amounts of detail, but just sort of
Yeah.
on like experience. I think where I'm at the moment in terms of my expenses, if I do a job and it makes $50 an hour, I think that would be just about where breaking even is. So I think once it gets up to 70 or 80, then it's profitable. And if it can be upwards of 100, then I think that's sort of really where I want to be, and what will actually, take the business in the right direction.
I know for me, it was the first time I put on an employee was the stark realization of how much I needed to charge to be able to pay the employee and pay my expenses and still make a profit. And it's still a continuing, ongoing assessment of things to go, okay, is the number I'm working around at the moment where I need to be in order to be making a profit margin, not just covering expenses?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've been around 15 years now.
Yeah, you'd know a thing or two.
Well, like I said, I'm still monitoring those things and reassessing as I go.
Mm.
But yeah, that's an interesting one because I've talked to a few people that their expenses are under 10% of their rate. So if they're charging out $150 an hour or something like that, and they're going, okay, I'm $15 an hour is my expenses, or less than $15 an hour. And there's not a lot of people I know that will claim less than 10% expenses, but there's a few. Most people seem to be somewhere around 40 to 50% in expenses.
Yeah, wow, that does sound actually quite high now you mention it. But I mean, if you're buying new equipment, it may well be higher than that. I think when I was initially starting, it may have been, 70 or 80% of the money I was making was just going into buying the right tool for the job.
Yep, definitely. So yeah, the rate that you charge obviously changes the proportion, but also factors like you're buying new equipment or you've got a lot of unbillable
Yep.
hours. So if you do a lot of 15-minute jobs and there's decent travel time in between each job, you could be losing half of your time in travel. And
Absolutely.
that makes a massive difference to the hourly rate you need to charge. So there's a bunch of factors in there that are worth looking at and making sure you have a good grasp on that.
Yeah, exactly. Like recently I've hurt my ankle, so I'm in a moon boot at the moment. The doctor says I'm
Yeah.
allowed to do a little bit of work myself, but it would just be impossible for me to keep on top of my regular workload alone. So I've hired
Yeah.
a couple of people, mainly just a couple of days a week, but I would like to, get to the point where I can have one or two full-time staff members. And yeah, that
Yep.
travel time, especially if it's smaller jobs, is just such a killer because at the end of the day, you've got to be able to pay them. Like if I had to say to them that I can't pay you for the travel time between jobs, that would just be totally unfair. Like if I was to be
Yep.
employed by any employer, I'd definitely expect that, on the clock from, signing on to signing off is what I'd be paid for.
So I've heard a couple of numbers when you put on an employee and you start going, am I profitable? So the easiest one is the rule of thirds. If you pay the employee $30 an hour, you need to pay $30 an hour in expenses and you need to make $30 an hour profit. You're at about $90 an hour if you're going to hit that rule pretty close. And then today you probably need to pay somebody more than $30 an hour if you're going to keep them. So that might go up to, instead of $90 an hour, you might be at $120 an hour just to hit that rule of thirds. Another one I've heard was actually 4 times the cost of a wage, and that had a couple of other variables in there in terms of having a shop front or a warehouse or other expenses that are a little bit steeper than working out of your own home from your own vehicle only. But yeah, the other one that I thought was interesting is if you pay an employee and you pay all of your expenses, for each employee, you want to see $400 that is yours after all those things are paid for a day. So I think that puts me at about $800 a day at the moment to actually hit any of those markers or somewhere close to it.
Is that per employee that you're looking at for $800 a day in profit, or is that in what they're charged out at?
No. As in, that's the gross the employee should be making.
So that would be about $400 in profit would be $800 in turnover.
There's some variables there, right? So I use a lot larger equipment than you. You're using smaller equipment. You can probably get a better ratio on your expenses. So you might find if you're paying your employee $250 to $300 for a day, you might have $150 in expenses, and then you don't need to hit $800 to actually hit a decent profit margin. But most people that are running smaller tools or up to a mid-size ride-on, around that $800 to $1,000 a day is a good target. I know a couple of guys that are aiming more around the $1,500 a day per person.
I mean, to me it does, sound quite high, but I'm sure it's absolutely achievable if you've got the right work and the right clients and able to work efficiently.
Well, if people are making it, it's definitely achievable. But yeah, it does come down to whether you're providing your clients with something that they're happy with. So whether the price is steep or not, it's not the point. Are you giving them value?
Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, I think that's some interesting ones to look at when you look over your numbers and go, okay, how do I compare with other people in our industry? And this is a really important one. You're a little bit over 12 months in, maybe up to 18 months in at this stage. A lot of people starting a business are not going to have the reputation and they're not going to have the professional results. So starting a business, when you started at $30 an hour, it's not a bad thing. And you've worked out very quickly as you've built your reputation and your quality of finish that you need to be charging more than that. And customers are happy to pay it, right? It's not like they sit there going, I want to pay you $25 an hour. The people who want to pay $25 an hour are no longer your customers.
If anyone, says to me something like $70 an hour sounds too steep, then I just, don't even really bother trying to win them over, because if they're, looking at paying $25, $30 an hour, they're just not the type of person I want to be working with. And
Yeah.
like I've had some
I try
older
and
clients that were paying those sort of rates that I've tried to increase, and they just haven't taken it well. And I just haven't really pursued it further because at the end of the day, you can
Yep.
find other customers that are happy to pay.
I try and give people that are painful like that 3 quotes. And if they're already a customer, it's kind of hard to give them quotes, but you can throw that back at them when they're like, I think your price increase is too
Yeah.
much or whatever. But you go, okay, a basic lawn mowing customer, and hear this out because I know you're not chasing basic lawn mowing customers. Basic lawn mowing customer is worth about $80 per cut in Australia, and there's variables on the size of the lawn or all different factors that come in there. But a basic lawn mowing customer is about $80 per cut, 20 cuts a year. That's $1,600 a year.
Yeah.
So I like to give a customer 3 prices. You're my worst customer if you want to go $80 per cut, 20 cuts a year. That's my bare minimum. And when I say worst customer, you're still a good customer. That's why you're my worst customer, because I don't want bad customers.
Yeah, gotcha.
So if you then throw in 3 alternatives there, the bare minimum is I'm turning up, I'm doing 20 cuts a year. That makes sure your lawn always looks tidy and nothing extra. Now, I would then go, okay, there's people who need additional services like fertilizer and grub treatment and a couple of other things along those lines. You might go, okay, if they're 20 cuts a year and I'm throwing in a couple of treatments and maybe offering them weekly mowing through the busiest 2 or 3 months in summer, that's going to change them from $1,600 a year to $3,000 a year. Now, that's a nice customer.
That's your best customer you've mentioned.
So then you go, okay, you want no expenses spared. We're going to do weekly mowing for 7 or 8 months of the year, and then fortnightly mowing through the slow season and everything else that needs to be done, gardening. And this is why I'm referring to this for you, because you would, instead of throwing in a lot of extra lawn services, you might do that too, but you might go, okay, a basic customer is going to be lawn and gardens.
Edges, weeds,
and that's my
pruning trees, all that sort of thing.
Yeah. So you might go, all right, the bare minimum is X, and then the ideal customer is one where I look after their whole yard, and then the fussiest customer in the world is still a good customer, but they're not my favorite because they're not quite as easy to deal with as the one that wants no expenses spared, just looks good.
They're going to be the one that's really going to be, quite picky and expecting a really high standard, and, you may be finding that they're dissatisfied with things that, you might find really trivial, like, a couple of leaves or something like that, because they're expecting that really immaculate, perfect service.
And again, a lot of people will refer to them as red flags and get rid of them. And I say, no, we are offering a service. There is a price attached. So if you're fussy, then that price is going to be according to how fussy you are, as well as the amount of time that I need to spend there. So if I factor in, say, that basic customer is $1,600 a year, that's based on me getting in and out of that property fairly quickly. If the customer's going to be very fussy, I'm going to need to spend more time there to make sure that I'm meeting their expectations. It's going to be more expensive, even if it's still just 20 cuts a year.
It might be a couple of walkthroughs. It might be, some really detailed instructions. It might be, just making sure everything is, absolutely immaculate. And I really like the point that you're touching on about, rather than looking at people who are, too cheap or too picky as being, people that aren't worth it, as, making an assessment that every customer basically is a customer that you do want to win over, but on the right conditions. So provided that they're, happy to pay what it's worth, then you're, quite happy to work with them. And if they're not, then that's when they become someone not really worthy of working with, not just in them asking those questions initially.
Yeah, don't be afraid to walk away from a bad customer, but at the same time, work out a price and list of expectations that both you and the customer can be happy with at the right price. That might be worthwhile.
Absolutely,
saying.
Yeah. If you can communicate with them, that's what's really going to get you success, I guess.
I think there's only been 2 or 3 customers in 15 years that I've gone, no, nothing is going to make them a good customer. See you later. one of them was actually a good paying customer, but he worked night shift and he insisted that I turn up when it was convenient for him. And I'm like, no, I've got a
Yeah.
schedule. See you later.
Yeah, look, I still have a lot of
But-
people that, require me to show up at a particular time. And if it can fit in with my schedule,
Yeah.
I'll often, do it to work with them. But yeah, at the same time,
Yeah.
I guess when you get busier, that in itself becomes a bit of a challenge.
Well, within reason, it can be done. But this customer was changing that as we go. So next week, sorry, Wednesday's no good. Can you do Thursday? And I'm like, no, I can't do Thursday. I've got a full
Yep.
schedule. And then the following week, can you do Tuesday? And can you do it at this time
Yep.
of the day? And it's like, no, can't do it. I cannot look after you anymore. See you later.
Yep.
But most of the time, you can offer a customer like that an option. So if they're quite fussy, and moving the time is a difficult one, but you could turn around and say, hey, you know what? It's an $80 cut every time I turn up. But if you want to be able to shift my whole schedule, you're going to pay me $2,000 a week.
Yeah.
They'll say no, right? But there are people out there willing to pay that sort of money.
Maybe, yeah.
Not maybe, definitely. Yeah. There are customers out there that are happy to spend that sort of money.
If it's convenient for them.
Well, if you line up expectations and that's the price that makes it work, then that's
for sure.
Fine, no problem.
For sure. I mean, yeah, I guess that's the other thing in this sort of line of work is not only are your customers expecting a quality job in terms of the lawn looking good, but they're also expecting quality in terms of customer service. So they want to be working with someone that they know is, easy to deal with, friendly, able to communicate, turns up when they say they're going to turn up and, meets their expectations.
Yep.
Yeah, getting back to them quickly, all of that sort of thing.
Yeah. So I hear a lot of people saying, I am not going to work with a customer who doesn't pick up their dog's poo. I 100% support people who want to make that as a expectation. The customer has to pick up the dog poo. If they don't pick up the dog poo, then I'm not doing it. We're in a service business where you can just put a price on it. So, you are doing dirty work, whether you want to admit it or not. And if it's picking up dog poo instead of just cutting the grass and trimming the trees, then put a price on it that makes it worth it.
Yeah.
And there are people out there who should say, no, I'm not picking up dog poo. And certainly if they're concerned about the risk of disease from the dog poo, which is a real risk, I'm not saying that we should just ignore it, but for some people that risk is so serious for them that they are like, no, I can't deal with it.
Yeah, but then if you're just starting out and taking what you can get, I mean, if someone's happy to, throw you an extra $20 or whatever it might be to clean up after the dog, you might not have any problem with it.
That's right. So that's my view on it, is carry a shovel and a stick, whatever, dog bag. Chuck it in their bin.
Blow it if
and when you
small
create
enough.
the job, when you create the job, just deal with the fact that that's part of the job. And you can raise it with the customer and go, well, my 3 quotes depend on you picking up dog poo. So cheapest one, you pick up dog poo. If you're not picking it up, you go up to the next price.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think there's enough people out there that own dogs that we can easily go, yep, if I'm a dog person, I can handle picking up dog poo as part of the job.
Yeah, for sure.
And if you don't do it, that's your choice. No problem.
That's it. You can, when you've got your own business, you can pick and choose a bit in what you are and aren't willing to do. And if that means, winning over more or less work, then so be it.
Yep. It's like you choosing to do a lot more gardening than lawn mowing, and I choose to do a lot more lawn mowing than gardening. It's the power of being in business.
And I even hear some people that choose to seek out a lot of hand weeding jobs, which a lot of other people, just think is insanity.
Yeah, and I say put a price on it that makes you smile.
Yeah, for sure.
Why not do hand weeding if you're getting paid $500 an hour to do it?
Exactly.
I'm getting to that age where I can't.
Yeah, fair enough.
I can do some hand weeding, but I don't want to sit there doing that all day.
Exactly. Like, I'm definitely, trying to seek out more the sort of work that I can, use machines to do rather than just, backbreaking labor. But at the same time, I'm definitely, still in that starting out phase, and absolutely take what you're saying about putting a price on it that is going to make it work, and then just sucking it up and doing it, even if it's not your favorite job to do. As long as they're happy to pay your bills, who am I to say no?
Yeah, and I think you're in that stage of business where you're trying to juggle between being on your own and having an employee working with you. I think the moon boots pushed you a little bit more towards keeping the employee busy, but once you're back walking full weight bearing without a moon boot, then you got to raise that as a serious question in going into winter as well. Is, do I chase enough work to keep the employee busy?
Yeah.
Or do I say, see you later, come back around October?
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard a lot of gardeners say to me things like they've looked at having employees, they've had employees or teams in the past, and it's just not worth it because, they might say something like they get more work done, but they don't necessarily earn more money, or it's just too many headaches. It's just another, person that you've got to deal with, communicate with, pay, all the rest of it, more expenses. And I think a lot of people just get stuck as a solo operator, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like, if that's what works for your business, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But in terms of the business that I want to ultimately build and pursue, I definitely do think that there's a lot of value in it for me in terms of having staff or having a team. So even if that means my profit ratios are smaller, I still think that I'm looking at wanting to have some sort of a team, whether that's 1, 2, or however many people it's going to be, keeping them busy so that I can have that capacity. So when the peak season comes, to just be able to continue building and having what I see, what I've heard people refer to as sort of having a business rather than just having a job for yourself.
And I think that's why a lot of people go back to being solo once they've tried putting on an employee and they realize they didn't want to be a manager. They just wanted to be self-employed.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that's a good choice for a lot of people to make. That's why they joined our
100%,
industry.
Yeah. And if that's what works for your business, a lot of the, I guess, happiest and even most successful gardeners are just solo operators.
And I recommend people read the E-Myth because that's really good at breaking down the difference between somebody who's a technician just doing a job and somebody who's an entrepreneur and somebody who's a manager. And you've got to be all three if you want to have employees and a business that's growing. Then you really got to get your head around that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how you grow over the next 2 or 3 years. Might have to track you down for another interview.
I'm sure we'll have to catch up again and see what direction I've managed to take, whether it is something that I do just get stuck on or if I'm able to, pursue those goals and build a bit of a business that can keep a team busy.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're already getting your head around a number of those issues in terms of dealing with employees and keeping in check with your hourly rates and your day rates and all those things to make sure that you're going to be profitable with an employee. I think that what you said is really important. You do not expect an employee to be as efficient as you will be being 100%. The boss. You can do more work than they are willing to do. Not that they can't do it, but what they're willing to do.
No one's going to care as much as the owner.
Yeah, that's right. So you can motivate them with performance pay and various different things that help to encourage them to do a good job and an efficient job. But yeah, you're the boss. So that's a big difference. I guess the other thing that comes up there is you should have a look at a CRM fairly soon if you're going to be keeping an employee on, and there's going to be the potential for you to have a second vehicle if you keep growing. Then you really want to look at a CRM that helps you manage your schedule and your invoicing and keep on top of all of the things your employees are doing.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening to Aussie Lawn Stars. Please remember to rate and review the show on the Apple Podcasts app or the player you use. Exciting new shows are released every Monday. Make sure you follow or subscribe to hear the next episode.